Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today I wanted to do a review of the film Spiral from the book of Saw. Shout out to Lionsgate for sending me this 4K edition of the film to review for the channel. Before going into the review, though, I wanted to apologize for not having much content out the last 24-48 hours. Baby Thor is still sick, so I'm still doing the whole stay-at-home dadding, and it seems like he might be getting better, but yesterday was a really tough day, and so again, I just wanted to put that out for all the followers of the channel to thank you for your patience, and also just to give y'all an update on that. But before going into this review, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this. First off, let's talk about the actual physical copy, the physical disc itself. So I got this very early edition. This will be available for purchase on July 20th. So the actual 4K version of the film will be available at that time. You can get it right now on digital release if you want, but if you want a physical copy, it'll be available in all the different combinations on July 20th. So just in maybe 4 days from when this video is actually being recorded. And the first thing I want to say is I actually really do like the cover art for this. I actually really appreciate the slipcover for this. I think it looks really awesome and really cool, especially for a film that for me, I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in, because I kind of gave up on the Saw franchise after Saw 3, because eventually it just became very repetitive and it became much more focused on the, I guess you could call it, torture porn aspect, which is not really a genre that I find myself really, drawn to all that much. The thing that I liked about the first few movies was that even though it had those elements to it, I did feel like the story was good enough and the amount of thrilling aspects and twists and turns were fun enough to keep it going, especially in that first movie. I really do think the first film is by far the best in the franchise up to this point. So I was kind of intrigued by this movie, though, because it is a continuation in the same universe, but it's obviously not just it's at least not marketed to be another Saw movie, which is why it's called Spiral in this case. And so this film, of course, stars Chris Rock. You also have a guest appearance, and I guess you could really say a supporting character role played by Samuel L. Jackson, who's in the movie. Not too much, really, probably about 10-15 minutes of screen time. But still a very essential part of the story, I would argue, overall. But yeah, as far as the physical stuff so far, I would say slipcover artwork is pretty cool, very glossy with a little bit of that reflection that you can see. Again, I do like the coloration that you have on that. Of course, when you actually have the actual disc itself, it is not nearly as colorful, but that is typical of most DVD, Blu-ray, 4K releases nowadays. What I do like is actually, it's one of those things that people don't talk about, I think, as nearly as much, is that you actually have some really cool artwork on the actual discs themselves. So again, not only do you have like that spiral artwork there, but also it has in that way, right, the jigsaw or like, the saw-like factor there. And so this edition, the 4K, does come also with a Blu-ray. Both the Blu-ray and the 4K also have special features on them. And so as it says here from the 4K disc 1, it says audio commentary with the director, co-writer, and composer. Interesting to have the composer on there. Also, audio commentary with producers of the film and the consequences of your actions, creating spirals. So a little bit of a short on here behind the scenes of the actual creating of this story. And then on disc 2 on the Blu-ray, you have drawing inspiration, illustrated trap breakdowns, decoding the marketing spiral, theatrical teaser trailer, and the theatrical trailer. Typically, you find trailers on many of these releases. But again, you do get a pretty decent amount of special features, not just on the Blu-ray disc, but on the 4K disc. It's very cool to have that available on the 4K disc, because typically when it comes to 4K releases, normally it is rather limited in the amount of special features on there, and it makes a lot of sense because these movies in 4K are going to take up a lot of space, so you're not going to have a lot of space to put special features on. So that's why typically they do have a Blu-ray edition as well, which takes up a lot less space, but then it also allows them to put a lot more special features on that. So the fact that you get special features on both, I think, is pretty cool to see. This does come with a Dolby Atmos track, and I can say as far as the actual visual quality of the movie is concerned, I think it actually looks pretty good as far as the transfer is concerned. I think it looks really good on Blu-ray. I was able to look at a little bit of the 4K edition of the movie as well. I was having some issues with my setup, but both of them, I think, as far as visual quality goes, looks really good. I think that the sound on this film is actually really well done as well. Really helps to kind of build the ambiance, really helps to build the tension of the movie itself. And so I would say, as far as the physical copy, as far as the actual release, I think Lionsgate did a pretty good job getting this out on physical release as such. Now, going into the actual movie part of it, the actual movie, this film, even though it is marketed in a lot of ways as being something new and different and unique, I guess you could say. At least that's how I perceive the marketing. This is essentially a Saw movie. If you've seen a Saw movie, you would have seen this movie. There really isn't a whole lot of difference in this movie, except now instead of it being Jigsaw, it is now a copycat. It is now a copycat, and instead of it being someone going after what seems to be random people for different things, it's a copycat going after cops. And that's one of the big messages, I think, of this movie, is that it's not necessarily a anti-cop film, but there's obviously anti-cop sentiment, or at the very least anti-bad cop sentiment in this movie, as the person who is going after these cops makes it very clear that they want to clean out the department and only wants to target these bad cops and put them into traps. And so if you're used to the traps that you see in the Saw movies, you see that very similarly happen here. I would say the big difference, though, is because this is a copycat and this is not really someone that they established. And again, I guess going into some spoilers here, when they reveal the character, I guess I won't go specifically to who it is, the person. I don't think it's hard for people to have determined who the actual bad guy is by the end of the film. I think there's enough clues throughout the movie, and also just things that happen. You're like, something tells me that this person probably is going to end up being involved in some way. But the big thing, I guess you would say, is that it's not someone who's just a disciple of Jigsaw. It's just someone who happens to have been wronged by a corrupt cop. And you then have the story about, you know, the process by which they came to be where they are. And then they start to develop these traps. And so that was kind of a weird thing for me because, you know, in the other films, when you have copycats, you know, they're very clearly disciples of Jigsaw. And so you do have that aspect of, you know, almost training or at least studying of the person to be able to kind of come up with these really interesting traps. But for this person to not really be associated at all with Jigsaw and still have a lot of the same feels and still be able to pull out the same kind of production quality and ability. I don't know. It was a little bit too much on the nose for me. Not to mention the way in which the guy kidnaps people is by wearing a pig's mask. And obviously that is symbolic of, you know, cops being pigs and everything. So it is just kind of this weird, interesting dynamic of it showing really good cops. It's showing, you know, obviously really corrupt cops as well. So I do think that there is some commentary to be had in here with the modern world that we live in, with a very anti-cop culture that we seem to be a part of nowadays, with everything that's been happening the last couple of years. And I think that that is something that is going to potentially turn some people off. For me, though, that really wasn't something that distracted me a whole lot from the movie. For me, it was just the way the film was made. It was made in a very similar Saw fashion, but it almost felt like this movie was just hey, we need to make more money. We need to be able to make more films in the Saw franchise because the Saw franchise is pretty much a guaranteed moneymaker. At least it was for a very long time. This movie, I don't actually think made any actual profit. But let's go ahead and continue this. Now we'll have the Book of Saw. Now that gives us the opportunities to create more and more movies in the Book of Saw universe without it having to actually be a Saw movie with the actual characters established in said universe. But in the end, all you have is basically what feels like a very bad copy of one of the original Saw movies. Basically what happened towards the end of the Saw franchise, where every film as they came out just really became much more repetitive, became a lot easier to be able to predict the outcome, and just not as interesting. Also, there was this weird styling as well, where they would have these shots of actors, you know, specifically most notably of Chris Rock, and they would have a shot of him, and then they would do a quick shot to him like screaming or yelling, and obviously it's meant to show the inner turmoil, right, the inner emotion that is going on right now, but it just really came across as really weird and cheesy and artificial. And also there are several shots where it's like a close-up shot of Chris Rock, and Chris Rock throughout the entire movie in those close-ups gives the same look where it's just like this deadpan stare, trying to be uber serious. And there's moments where I think Chris Rock does show some pretty decent dramatic chops, but then there's other parts where it just seems like he's overacting, and it just doesn't really seem like it feels genuine at all at any point. I think all the supporting actors who are the cops in the film, that they're fine and serviceable, but it's just nothing really to write home about. And then, as I said, Samuel L. Jackson's character really is much more of a supporting character, and he's hilarious, and he's Samuel L. Jackson essentially in the movie, and that's pretty much all I can say for it. If you like Samuel L. Jackson doing Samuel L. Jackson stuff in a movie, then you might enjoy this. If you enjoy all of the Saw films and you enjoy, this type of torture porn styling, then I think that you would find a lot of enjoyment in this movie. But just for me personally, it's really just not my genre, and I think that this is a movie that could have had a lot of potential. I think the casting of Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, I think, could have actually really raised the level of the film to be something better than what it was. But I think this film really suffers from not really a very good story. I think it also suffers from kind of weak direction as well. And in the end, I think that it makes a lot of sense as to why this film didn't bring a lot of people out to the theater to go see it, and why, even as a low-budget film, it ended up not making a whole lot of money. So if I had to give the actual film a grade, I'd probably give this film, it a C-. Again, I really think it's just a below-average movie, and again, some people might enjoy it who are fans of the Saw franchise, but other than that, just the music choices and the editing style and just the very artificial nature of what a lot of these scenes and sequences feel like, it really just, I don't think, really hit the mark the way that it should have. I think that if you're a fan of the franchise, though, you might like it. As far as the actual physical release is concerned, I think that it's fine. I think that it gives you really high quality image, really high quality sound. I was able to listen to the 7.1 Dolby track, and so I think that it sounded really, really good. The sound design, I think, for the most part, is also done well. So again, all those physical elements and physical aspects, I think, are there. So if you're just a Blu-ray or 4K collector, I think that this would be a fine addition. But obviously, as far as the actual story, which is what I'm much more interested in, is collecting movies based on their stories and based off of those more tangible elements of rewatchability and things like that, I don't really think that this one hits the mark. But still, a shout out to Lionsgate for sending this to me for a review. Obviously, this is something where I'm allowed to give my complete thoughts on. But again, I think that the release is good. The movie, however, I just honestly think that they should go back to the writing room, and if they want to do more of these Book of Saw films, because this does set up for potential sequels within the Spiral universe, I think that they really need to go back to basics, because if they could start getting some better stories in this, I think that they could actually bring a lot of people back, because these very predictable, very by the numbers, 90-minute stories, I just don't think are going to be enough to bring people back. Because yeah, you might have people that like the torture porn genre, but I don't think it's that in and of itself is enough to bring people back to the theater, especially with how things are now. But anyway, have you seen Spiral? Do you plan on picking it up? Let me know your thoughts on the film in the comments section below. And again, shout out to Lionsgate for sending that to me. It is available on 4K and on physical media on July 20th, but you can pick it up now on digital platforms everywhere. So thank you all very much for being here today. Make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching on the Odyssey. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my July Patreon and Subscribe Star members: Andrew Hoyle, Biffer de Hobbit, Brian P., Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina B, and Tina Bojan. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon, and also to my Subscribe Star members: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J. Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. And I also want to make sure to shout out my Locals members. I am now available over at locals.com, and I've got 2 monthly supporters over there. The first of my local supporters is Goblin Squatch. Shout out to you, good sir. And also, I now have a second supporter over on locals.com, and that is Robert Barnes. Shout out to both of you very much. Thank you very much for supporting me on that new platform at the Keeper of the Bifrost level. If you want to find out more information about that, go check out my Locals page. You can find the link in the description, and it tells you everything that you would get in that Keeper of the Bifrost level, which is right now the only level available on that platform. And I also want to make sure to shout out any new Patreon members. And for right now, I want to shout out Mondo Spieler, who is my newest member over on Patreon. Thank you all very much for being here today. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single live stream and video on the channel, please make sure to check out the links in the description of ways that you can support me over on Patreon and Subscribestar as well. It gives you access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, and digital codes. Also, access to a podcast that I do with John the Flickpick Flickinger, where we have a lot of fun. We also answer Q&A questions as well. And also you might get access to the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to a once-a-month podcast exclusively where I bring on you to the main channel with everyone else who is at the level, and we all just talk about movies, pop culture, and tons of fun stuff like that. And also, of course, Tina, who is the Empress of the Universe, is going to give us tons of reviews of movies and also maybe a couple of awesome rants here and there as well. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you go ahead and check out those links. Again, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.